is a face that's very familiar to all of us, and that's Rick Thomas of Nautical Structures. He founded Nautical Structures 32 years ago, 1986, an industry-leading manufacturer of high-quality custom hydraulic motion and control technologies whose creations appear on some of the world's most iconic yachts. Rick served on the board of directors with me of the International Superyacht Society and is a regular contributor to Onboard Online. Here with Lift It, Dink It, Dunk It, or Walk the Plank, Rick Thomas.
Bob, appreciate it. Let's have some fun with this one. Yeah, lift it, sink it, dive it, and board it. I get asked the question all the time, what do I do? What's Nautical Structures? This video is a fun little example of a little bit of what we do. I describe what we do as lift, or actually motion and control through hydraulic technology. That's probably the best way to describe what we do. And our specialty is to bring you and your clients, guests on and off the boat, and to bring your tenders, your dinghies, your submarines, your airplanes on and off the boat. So this video is kind of how I wanted to start my presentation. This is a project we just commissioned in Istanbul at Turquoise. Amazing 77-meter yacht called Go. Just hats off to those guys. They did an amazing job with this boat. We put a lot of equipment on the boat. This side accommodation stair is just one piece of it. Just forward of that, you see that hatch open. That's also something we do, these watertight shell doors. Behind that hatch is a 32-foot limousine tender, and we have overhead cranes that launch that limousine tender out the side of the boat. So I think this is my, yeah. So what I wanted to kind of point out, and I wanted to start with a little bit of a history lesson because I think it's relevant to today's boat building. 32 years ago when I started in this business, a couple guys by the name of Henry Berger and Frank Dennison were building most of the yachts that were being built in the day. And these guys were building their own davits. They were building their own boarding systems. If you wanted to get on and off the boat with a gangway, you typically had something that the crew picked up and moved around and set up on a gimbal with cables. Side accommodation stairs like you just saw didn't exist. So you had little hydraulic, or not hydraulic, you had manual davits or booms that folded out the side of the boat with cables. Safety was always an issue. Reliability was non-existent. It was whatever the shipyard could put together at the time. Sometimes they did a good job, sometimes not so much. And then companies like mine came in, and I'm just one of a handful of companies that specialized. And I think that's what happened to our industry is we started to get specialization. My company specialized in boarding equipment and tender handling equipment. You have stabilizer companies that specialize only in yacht stabilization, steering, specialty, water making specialties, toilet specialties. It's become a specialty industry, which has been a net benefit for the industry over the last 30 years. It's relevant to the history because when you get into what we're doing today, this is a good example of the variety of things that happen on boats. And this is all made possible by hydraulic systems and electronic control systems. I equate these two kind of like the systems in your body. You've got a central nervous system that basically gives you your intelligence and lets you move through your day. That's the brain. That's the electronics in the boat. Your musculature, how things move and how you get the strength to move is your circulatory system, your muscular system. That's your hydraulic system through the boat. And so when you start looking at these kind of components, you'll start seeing that the hydraulics have a huge role in this whole. Now move this, come on, next slide please. Okay, so things like balconies, that's all done hydraulically, and you see these more and more on boats. Boarding systems like these gangways, these are also hydraulically actuated, hydraulically deployed, and again, compared to what they were years ago, this is your client's first experience with the boat. Done properly, you're essentially bringing the boat to the dock. And the moment they step on the end of that gangway, they're stepping on board your yacht and they're getting their first feel. So if it's a good product, if it feels strong, if it doesn't move around while you're walking on it, your customer is comfortable coming on board, his mother-in-law is even more comfortable coming on board, everybody's happy. If it's a poorly made product or if it's a lightly made product, you're kind of wondering if you're going to make it across the moat coming into the castle. So this is kind of where our company specializes in very high-end, high-quality equipment to a high standard so that when you step on board, you feel like you're on board the boat. We have a pretty amazing factory over in the west coast of Florida where we manufacture this. It's about 100,000 square foot. We're about 60 people putting it all together. Everything's handmade, hand fit. This is a fit up process we go through prior to delivery to the end user. And then we get into what I really enjoy in this business, and that's the interface with the naval architect, interface with the shipyard. If I could go, I don't know if I can go back, but if I was able to go back, you'd see a really interesting set of doors and hatches to deploy a stair or a passerelle. Where we got into the design with a naval architect, everything was really good. The tender garage and the aft beach club area was perfect. The back swim platform of this boat was just gorgeous. And then we looked at where we're going to put the passerelle, and you couldn't put it anywhere because of the aft beach club and the garage spaces they'd created. And we spent a lot of time kind of developing a vertically mounted system in the aft fashion wings outside of the staircase that takes you up into the boat. And came out to be a very expensive gangway, but it was a pretty neat solution that would let the back end of the boat open up, let the stairway come out, the passerelle come out, and then everything fold back up to kind of hide away. Sometimes that's what's necessary, and that's what a specialty company like ours does, is find a solution to an almost impossible problem. There you go, done right, the gangway or whatever piece of equipment we're building is part of the boat and looks like it's part of the boat. Fun project right here. We were recently contracted by a client to come up with a gangway with absolutely no place to mount in the boat. This was a refit project we did at Director Shipyard recently. We ended up building a pocket that ran the full beam width of the boat and the swim platform. The client came with a list of requirements. He wanted to be able to board from the side. He wanted to be able to board from the stern. He had a couple tenders he wanted to be able to bring alongside and dock. He was an avid diver. He wanted to be able to get back on the boat with diving gear. And he wanted to be able to go to a variety of docks, but the problem was the gangway initiated from near the water line. The problem is the gangway lives in the water line. So we had to solve a lot of problems, including how do you keep a really high-end piece of hydraulic equipment in service for the life of the boat when it lives literally in salt water. So we ended up with this passerelle. It's kind of cool because it's fabricated from stainless steel 316. It lives in a specialized pocket that's ventilated and drained, and every time it moves in and out of the boat, it gets a freshwater wash down. It is able to deploy as a tender dock. You can bring your tenders up. There's cleats in the gangway that you can tie off to. Pretty cool little video here of it coming out of the water. So you can get about 2 meters underwater. You can come up with your dive gear and literally walk up the stairway. And you can get to a high dock as well. So the stairs go in both directions. That was fun. So that's coming up with some interesting solutions, starting with a blank piece of paper and going, what if and what how and how do we? And that's kind of what we specialize in, and that's where we've kind of built our reputation over the years, being able to do these types of solutions. Here's a couple examples of the gangway coming off to the side for side boarding. You can tell they can get to the big dock in Antibes or down in Antigua, no problem. Makes a great diving board too. The kids love it. So into the the boarding side of the solution, there's another side accommodation stair. This is able to rotate away from the side of the boat. A typical gangway coming out of the back of the boat. Side boarding out the side of the boat. There's a lot of different ways to accomplish what we want to accomplish. This is another piece of it. When we try to get people on and off the boat that are wheelchair bound, handicapped, I guess we're moving on to Savannah already. We do a lot of ADA stuff and handicap access. We also do some pretty cool integrated systems. This is a project we did with DeVries a number of years ago. It's Motor Yacht Savannah. You'll see one of our Solus class cranes folded up inside. We go this direction because space is valuable, real estate's valuable, and the way the naval architects and designers are building boats these days, we're able to utilize space where you couldn't before. With hydraulics, we're able to actuate these large hatches, actuate these cranes, and use space that would otherwise be dead or unusable in a boat. And this crane is rated for man launching, Solus application. The whole system is able to deploy the tender in 5 minutes or less, which complies with the LSA rules for Solus. And is also great machine for just everyday crew tender use. So they use this boat all the time, which is a real benefit for keeping a piece of equipment like this in service. On commercial vessels, they've got dedicated pieces of a kit specifically for rescue boat launching or lifeboat launching. And generally, they're not used pieces of equipment until they're needed. And oftentimes, once they're needed, you run into problems where they're not working the way they're supposed to. We take the approach that this equipment's also used for your everyday use. And by setting it up that way, you know it's always in service. You know it's going to be ready to be used when you need it to be used for an emergency situation. Similar application, different kind of machine. Tenders living under a hatch on deck. Sailing yacht, we did a number of builds with alloy yachts down in New Zealand. They had a cool little swimming pool that they'd store the tender in, and we had a nice folding crane that launched. Something that has recently come into conversation, and I think it's something to pay attention to. People get in these boats and ride these boats to the waterline, and there's unfortunate stories of people being hurt, crew members being killed by being on something they shouldn't be on. There are products now available. There's specifications that are being written that is allowing for man launching and man riding. It's a HOP standard, handling of people. And it's a standard that's actually higher than Solus. But if you know for sure you're going to be launching a boat with people in it, perfect example is a large yacht with tenders up in the foredeck and no obvious way to get crew in and out of those tenders. You want to go for an HOP certification. Manned submersibles, there's a certification for that, where if you're going to be putting people in a manned submersible and launching that submersible, the equipment that launches it must comply with LAME, lifting appliances in the marine environment, for manned submersibles or handling of people. So those are changes that have come into our industry, didn't exist 30 years ago, and are part of the everyday design standards of what we're building today. Another example of a crane that's got dual purpose. This was built to launch toys and tenders. It's also certified for Solus. Has a hydraulic power unit built right in the middle of the unit. so that it could be used in an emergency, all self-contained. Picking up some big tenders. And some bigger tenders. So in going again back into just efficiency of equipment on the boat, this is photos we took earlier this month in Turkey, where this is the crew tender on the foredeck of that 77-meter boat. We did the hatches, we did the hinges, we did the crane, we did the whole package. And by doing it that way, we have complete control over the entire motion technology that's involved in doing this. There's new control technologies that are part of this equipment that didn't exist years ago. Wireless proportional controls, programmable logical controls that allow sequencing of these events so that things happen safely, or prevent crew and guests from getting into places they shouldn't be while things are moving. This is one of our big hatches going through a factory acceptance test before being delivered to a boat. This is a big expedition yacht that's being built in Turkey. This is some of the hydraulics inside the hatches that lock it and control it. And this is kind of a neat little piece. This is a hatch inside of a hatch. Again, some of the motion and control stuff we do, which is fun, and it lets the boat builder and the designer do things that otherwise they couldn't have done previously. We do small vessels as well. I have a whole line of hydraulic products, gangways and davits and cranes, suitable for your 40, 50, 60-foot boat. And then I wanted to kind of wrap this up with a little insight into how we get this equipment tested and ready to come to the shipyard. These are tender garage systems that launch larger tenders in a variety of ways. This is kind of interesting. When we do a soulless crane test, that inclined test bed goes to 22 degrees, and we operate that piece of equipment at 2.2 times its design rating at that negative inclination, and that's the kind of stress loads that we put into the equipment prior to delivery to the boat. And if we can start this, I think this video should run. There we go. So you're going to see a variety of different test fixtures we have in our factory. It's a transom lift system that goes on a, so we deliver those to Hatteras. They put those on their 60, 70, and 90-foot boats. And every single product that goes into the field goes through a test process before it's delivered. Here we're testing synchronization of the two sides to make sure that they move together and that one doesn't move ahead of the other. We use asymmetrical loading for that. And here you see some of our crane testing. Again, this is a typical crane test. We're only going up against about an 8-degree inclination. And then we can pitch the same test stand to simulate a 20-degree list, 10-degree trim condition of the yacht, which is what's required for soulless loading. And there you see it. And if you've got an engineering bone in your body, you know the side loads in that piece of equipment right now are pretty significant. We're able to stack weights in the load cells so that we can pick up to 10, 15 tons, and our largest cranes we've built so far have been 15-ton capacity. Here's how we test our overhead crane systems in the factory. And again, you see it's a finished product, painted, ready to go to the shipyard, going through its factory acceptance test prior to delivery. hard to see it, but the line that's being used there is a Dyneema. It's a type of Spectra composite fiber line, and almost all of the tender handling equipment we build today is rigged with that kind of rigging instead of wire rope. And that's it. The floor is open for any questions.
Rick, I think it might be important that you threw the acronym SOLAS out there for those that aren't aware of what dynamic SOLAS are, what that means.
Safety of life at sea. Yeah, thanks, Bob. Kind of got this big kickstart right after that little boat called the Titanic sank, and there weren't enough lifeboats on the ship to take care of everybody. And all of a sudden, we started paying attention to what happens when things go bad. So there's a convention called SOLAS, Safety of Life at Sea, and it's underwritten by the IMO, International Maritime Organization. The LSA rules are what dictate the compliance for SOLAS. And it's one of the few areas in our piece of the industry that are actually regulated. So there's a very specific list of requirements that a crane has to comply with to meet SOLAS standards. It's built under survey. Classification Society is involved in the manufacturing survey testing. It goes through a factory test. It also goes through a shipyard acceptance test, inclination test at installation. And what it does is it allows for the prediction of being able to launch a rescue boat or a lifeboat in adverse conditions at sea. So if the vessel's listing, there's multiple compartments that are flooding, the vessel can be listing as much as 20 degrees, trimmed out as much as 10 degrees, and the crane will still operate as it's supposed to. And that is a very rigorous standard.
Yeah, and if you don't
Very
have
few
the proper
products
compliance
product, you can't get insurance for the boat. You can't go into charter. And there's a standard under 500 gross tons, and it's a greater standard over 500 gross tons as far as what you have to comply to.
Not the reason that a lot of the bigger yachts that are being built today are maxed out at 12 passengers as well, because they're not SOLAS.
Yep, that has a big piece of it. The expense of getting there and the net value or the cost benefit comes from that.
Any questions?
Do you have a maintenance group that makes sure that your equipment is kept up and you don't rely on the individual boat owner? No, my question was, do you actually have a maintenance group that travels around the world and keeps on top of all your equipment instead of waiting for the individual owner to?
Yeah, we do. We have 3 service centers. One's based in our factory in St. Petersburg. One is based out of Lauderdale Marine Center here in Fort Lauderdale, and one's based out of Marina Barcelona 92 in Barcelona. They're staffed with nautical structures technicians, and then our guys also travel the world. They're constantly in some shipyard someplace working on our equipment. We've got over 4,000 pieces of equipment in service right now, and we stay pretty busy. We have, I think we're up to 14 certified service technicians under our payroll, and then we also go into shipyards and certify technicians, or they'll come to our factory twice a year. We do a training seminar in our factory, and shipyards and other companies can send their people to us and get certified, and then be a certified nautical structures technician to work on our equipment. Thank you.
One more question. But you can always corner Rick at lunch.
Yeah.
This table and ask him all the day. Rick, thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for the attention.